We're going to continue with the forum. David Haley, who is the state senator from the 4th District, does not have opposition, but we have asked him to offer some remarks with an opening statement. Senator?
I'm grateful for the opportunity. I'd like to thank the forum that's being held this evening. As mentioned, I am David Haley. I have the honor of serving now for 4 terms in the Senate, 3 terms in the House prior to that. And I just want to say most succinctly that this is a season of great expectation here in Wyandotte County. We all know what's at stake in Topeka. Many of us realize what's at stake here in Wyandotte County, and the participation is key. I do appreciate Mr. Bland saying that I don't have opposition either on the August 2nd or the November primary or general. But many of us are under siege whether we can see names on the ballot or not. I certainly feel it as I hear the voices resonate in Wyandotte County. Our concerns for whether or not we'll have the revenue to properly educate our children, the concerns that emanate for our public safety, for our law enforcement, and ensuring that our budgets are met, our highways are maintained as the better, if not the best, in this region. I hear the concerns, and whether or not I can see the opposition, I feel it all the time. And so I'm grateful for this opportunity. I thank you, each of you, for allowing me a brief opening statement, and let me underscore that I stand ready to continue to try and serve the best I can for all of Wyandotte County. Just to reach out and call me SENHALEY at AOL.com, and I'm listed whether online or wherever else, 913-321-3210. In political season and out of political season, I want you to reach out, anyone from Wyandotte County, and let me know how I can be of service. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have a question. Kansas has come up short on its revenues lately, and what would be your solution to the state's budget problem?
Well, thank you, Ms. Rupert. There's no quick fix for where we find ourselves now. Many of us feel that the reason for the revenue stream being curtailed, which previously met all of our obligation, has been a change in the tax code that was proposed and implemented by the current administration. I don't mean to be one to point the finger alone at what has happened in the administration. There is room for ample discussion as to what has happened with the national economy and how that can be improved. However, we are able to trace significant amounts of our previous SGF, or State General Fund monies, from changing the corporate tax structure. And I believe that we can find ways to find our budgets more responsible for what's actually needed. But as an incrementalist, it should have been done, I feel, with a scalpel and not with a hatchet. And in so changing the code, it has left us with looming deficits, which we can and should change beginning in 2017 when a new legislature that won't follow in lockstep with a failed economic riddle that has not been answered, that we can begin to reverse that trend.
Thank you. Can you bring us up to date and tell us about the progress in the legislature about the eyewitness identification bill and the body camera bill?
Well, thank you again, Ms. Rupert. I was pleased. It is difficult. I worked across the aisle, and we were very successful this year in passing my bill on eyewitness identification. It became a part of a measure that will bring greater accountability. We've seen in our nation now, and are troubled by often the wrong suspect being held immediately to consequence. And the eyewitness identification bill, which we were very fortunate in bipartisan fashion to see passed, ensures that benchmarks are met in the naming of a suspect, including but not limited to, I won't go into all of them at this juncture, though I do have copies of my newsletter available if someone would like them, I'd be happy to do that. But whether or not the eyewitness is certain, would sign a statement how certain they are that this is the appropriate suspect. Other benchmarks, including that we call it blinded procedures, that the investigator or officer asking them to pick out in a lineup someone doesn't actually know which one or even if that suspect is in that lineup. Whether or not someone has some additional, for example, glasses. Were you wearing your glasses when you happen to see this? And there are a series of others, but I won't go too much. But I'm happy to see that that will be implemented now by many police and many law enforcement agencies. And as for body cameras, too, that continues to be the challenge. I've been the solo sponsor for several years that will ensure that all law enforcement agencies, whether here at the Kansas City, Kansas Community College Security or our sheriff, our fine sheriff's office or KCKPD, but every department, even those in Bug Tussle, Kansas, would have to have in place law enforcement, active law enforcement, that's able to record what transpires during an altercation or a traffic stop. I don't need to refresh the memory of anyone in this audience that it's been crucial to have seen what transpired. And so often, too often, we're having to rely on individual citizens with cell phones to help us to better understand what occurs. And I believe that law enforcement, our taxpayer-supported men and women in blue, should have the opportunity to show their side of what transpires in the event they need to, as well as should any suspects, or in sadly many cases, those victims.
A follow-up question, would you have any idea where that money might be coming from for those people who have the cameras? Is it expensive? I know that bike helmet cameras are not expensive, but the police body cameras seem to be expensive.
Well, they are. Actually, they are, Ms. Rupert. They are not expensive. What has become expensive has been questions regarding how the data is stored. How long do you keep a shift if there's no question? But you know, part of that is we find a way to fund everything that we must in this society. How do we keep the video from red light cameras, which are on every intersection? And that hasn't seemed to cause us to not have those cameras when we have drivers who are running red lights. We find a way to fund what we feel is the necessity of transparency and full understanding and exposure. And I believe that we could maintain that data with those inexpensive cameras that are made available to all law enforcement. And we could also ensure certain areas of privacy, which too has been an issue that's legitimately raised as to what should be recorded. We don't want to see, for example, a witness to a potential crime be deterred from sharing openly with an officer because that witness knows that a camera is running and they would not want to be identified. We don't want to know what happens sometimes if an officer is taking a personal break, you know, and have the camera or the audio running. So there are areas that have to be tweaked and worked out, but they're working best and better in so many departments across the country. They are actually something that many FOPs, including ours here in Kansas City, Kansas, are supportive. And as I've said in offering and reoffering the body camera bill, this is not for Kansas City, Kansas, or Wyandotte County that I do this, but for those smaller, often rural districts, because we're already doing it or moving toward implementing those policies for body cameras for all active law enforcement here already.
Thanks. One more question. Let's see. Oh, here's another question about law enforcement. I heard a remark from a public official last night that that the laws need to be changed regarding the police use of force so that officers are not so easily exonerated for using deadly force. And do you think a change would be needed in those laws?
Well, that's a difficult question. I'm very supportive of our law enforcement. I say that in every audience I have time and time again. A few days after the 4th of July, not long ago, I knew that what I was hearing was no longer fireworks, that it was actually in my neighborhood, in my community, it was someone who was discharging a weapon, potentially a weapon that they didn't legally own. And I'm the first, as a longtime precinct committee person, which I did before I was in the legislature and continue to do, I called 911. And I encourage everyone to call 911. And sometimes circumstances escalate. And so getting back to the previous question, the evaluation as to whether or not deadly force during certain altercations were warranted should be something that could be reviewed at the appropriate time. I would hope that through training and through ways of non-lethal force being first exercised, that would become the training option that law enforcement would always implement to put in place, that we don't have some of the tragedies that we see. But I'm not one to second guess many times that law enforcement would have to think twice or thrice in what could be a deadly situation for those who are truly serving and protecting our community.
Okay, if we could have your closing statement, please, Senator.
Thank you again. I appreciate the panel and appreciate your allowing me the time. On behalf of the 4th District, which is 40% of the geography of Wyandotte County, it's been an honor to serve and to continue to serve. And mine is not a campaign pledge. Again, I'm not driven by any known opposition in either the primary or the general, but it's a sincere commitment. I remember these forums, time immemorial, that we've had here at the community college, and I must invoke the name of the late, great Dr. Stacy Aller, who was a fine moderator too, Mr. Bland. He did an excellent job. And that's been 20+ years. I enjoy this because I love our community. I appreciate the opportunity to serve. I appreciate getting a chance to see what are really the most beautiful people. And having run statewide as I have, I can say that without fear of contradiction. Most beautiful people in the state of Kansas are here in Wyandotte County. And it's an honor to serve, and it's a pleasure to participate. And I thank you again for allowing me.
Let's give the Senator a hand.